The crackle of the taser echoed in my ears. My wife, Maggie, crumpled to the gravel driveway like a dropped doll. Her scream still hangs in my throat, all because she parked our minivan 2 inches over the HOA's freshly painted no parking line. Linda Carmichael stood over her, smirking. The HOA president's manicured finger still hovered on the taser trigger. "Teach you to ignore the rules, sweetheart," she spat. Her 2 goons, HOA enforcers with matching buzz cuts, laughed like hyenas. But Maggie wasn't their first target. 3 months earlier, we'd moved to Serenity Oaks, a gated community in Austin, Texas, to give our autistic son, Ethan, a safe environment. Maggie called it starting fresh. I called it naive. But after my DEA undercover op in Juarez went sideways, we needed normalcy. Normalcy died the day Linda Carmichael knocked on our door. "Welcome to Serenity Oaks," she'd trilled, handing Maggie a 50-page rulebook. No bikes on Sundays, no red front doors, and absolutely no late-night Netflix binges. She'd winked, like we were sharing a joke. Her platinum blonde hair didn't move in the wind. Nothing about her moved naturally. We laughed it off, until the fines piled up. $500 for unauthorized shrubbery, $1,000 for excessive laughter after 9 p.m. Then the threats. "Comply, or we'll take your home." Maggie joked Linda was power drunk. I knew better. I'd seen that glint in her eye before, in cartel lieutenants who'd rather burn a village than lose control, but I never imagined she'd tase Maggie. As the enforcers dragged Maggie's trembling body to their golf cart, Linda leaned into my face. "Pay $10,000 in violations by midnight," she hissed, "or your wife spends the night in our detention suite." She threw a receipt at me. The charges included illegal possession of a pink throw pillow. That's when I noticed the smell. Linda's perfume, a cloying mix of gardenias and bleach, masked something chemical. Like the meth labs I'd raided in Mexico. My DEA instincts roared. This isn't about rules. It's about control. But I couldn't blow my cover. Not yet. So I handed Linda a cashier's check for $10,000. She smirked, pocketed it, and tossed Maggie's keys at me. "Next time, read the handbook," she said, climbing into her black Escalade. That night, I hacked the HOA's financials. Linda's detention suite wasn't a room. It was a warehouse. Her fines funded offshore accounts. And those enforcers? Ex-cons with assault charges. But the real shock came when I traced the perfume. The chemical signature matched a cartel-connected lab in Houston. Linda wasn't just power-hungry. She was laundering drug money through HOA fees. Our safe community was a front. Maggie cried when I told her. "We have to move," she whispered. "No," I said. "We're staying." Because Linda Carmichael just made the biggest mistake of her life. She messed with a DEA agent. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to sip coffee while Maggie bandaged her taser burns. Ethan hummed the Bluey theme song, lining up his dinosaur toys in precise rows. Normalcy. That's what Maggie wanted. But the rule book Linda left us glared from the counter, its pages filled with absurd fines and a single handwritten note. Pay or leave. I couldn't leave. Not now. "Daddy, why is Mrs. Carmichael mean?" Ethan asked suddenly, his voice high-pitched and urgent. He'd heard us arguing. I swallowed guilt. "Some people forget how to be kind." Maggie shot me a look. "Don't you dare tell him the truth." But the truth was eating me alive. Every time Ethan flapped his hands or repeated phrases, I saw Linda's smirk. She'd weaponized our son's autism to control us. Fines for disruptive behavior, threats to call Child Protective Services. That afternoon, I drove to Serenity Oaks' administration office, a fake corporate suite in a strip mall. Linda's assistant, a twitchy man named Carl, handed me a ledger. "Ms. Carmichael says you need to review these." His eyes darted to the door. The ledger was a masterpiece of fraud. Fake invoices for landscaping funneled cash to shell companies. Membership fees vanished into offshore accounts. And buried in the receipts, photos of me and Maggie at Ethan's therapy sessions. They'd been watching us. I texted my DEA handler, Rico. Found a pipeline. Meth profits laundered through HOA fees. Need eyes on Linda Carmichael. Rico's reply, stay and roll. We'll monitor. Stay and roll. Easy for him to say. That night, Maggie found me staring at Ethan's melatonin prescription. "You're scaring me," she whispered. "I'm ending this," I said. Linda called an emergency meeting 3 days later. The community center reeked of her gardenia perfume. She stood at the podium, smug as a queen, flanked by her enforcers. "Residents," she announced, "we've uncovered a threat to Serenity Oaks." The screen behind her flickered. Security footage, grainy clips of me sneaking into the maintenance shed. "This man," Linda spat, "has been tampering with our systems, and his wife." She smirked at Maggie. "Let's just say her therapy sessions aren't what they seem." The room erupted. Neighbors we'd waved to for months now glared, muttering about criminals and government spies. Maggie gripped my arm, trembling. Ethan hid behind her legs, whimpering. Then Carl stepped forward. "It's a lie," he blurted. "Linda's laundering money. She's—" An enforcer backhanded him. Carl crumpled. Linda didn't flinch. "Remove him," she said, "and evict this family immediately." We barricaded ourselves in our house. Maggie packed Ethan's essentials while I loaded my DEA-issued Glock. "They're not taking him," I said, voice shaking. "They're not taking us." But Linda's voice crackled over the HOA's intercom. "You have until dawn. Then we call the police when CPS." Maggie froze. "If they take Ethan, they won't." I pulled up Rico's number. No signal, of course. Then the lights went out. In the darkness, a rock shattered our living room window. A Molotov cocktail. No. A USB drive wrapped in a bandana. Maggie's hands shook as she plugged it into her laptop. It was Carl's files, bank records, photos of Linda meeting cartel members, a video of her threatening a resident. "Pay, or your daughter disappears." And a map, Serenity Oaks' water supply. Linda wasn't just laundering money. She was poisoning the community, drugging the water to keep residents compliant. The violations, the paranoia, the fights between neighbors, it was all her. Maggie stared at the screen, tears streaming. "We have to tell them," she whispered. I nodded. "But first, we burn her empire." The USB drive felt like a live grenade in my hand. Maggie's tears had dried into a cold, determined stare. "We expose her tonight," she said, "before she poisons anyone else." But Ethan's small voice stopped us. "Daddy, what's poison?" I froze. How do you explain a monster like Linda to a child who still believed clouds were cotton candy? Maggie pulled him close, her voice cracking. "Some people hurt others to feel big, but we're going to stop her." We drove to the local news station, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. On the way, Maggie gripped my arm. "What if they don't believe us?" "They will," I said, but my DEA training screamed, "Never involve civilians." The news crew listened, pale-faced, as I played Carl's footage. The anchor, a woman named Raina, leaned forward. "This is bigger than Serenity Oaks. We'll air it at 10 p.m. Relief flooded me. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Back off, agent, or your son's therapy files go public." Maggie paled. "They've been watching Ethan's sessions." The threat hung between us, but before I could reply, Raina's producer burst in. "We're getting calls. Linda's already spinning this. Says you're the drug lord." By dusk, Serenity Oaks was in chaos. Linda's goons patrolled the streets, handing out flyers. "DEA agent exposed! Protect our community!" Neighbors who'd brought us casseroles now glared from behind drawn curtains. A rock shattered our living room window, tied to a note, "Pedophiles go to hell." Maggie barricaded the doors, her hands shaking. "They're turning everyone against us." I pulled her close. "We'll prove the truth." But Ethan's screams cut through the room. He'd found the taser burns on Maggie's arm, angry red welts shaped like spider webs. "Who hurt you, Mommy?" he cried, flapping his hands. "I'll kill them." Maggie collapsed. "He's never said kill before," she whispered. At 9:45 p.m., the power went out. Linda's voice blared over the HOA intercom. "Last chance! Leave now, or your son becomes a ward of the state." I texted Rico. "They're threatening Ethan. Where's backup?" No response. Maggie loaded the Glock. "We fight." But then Ethan did something he'd never done. He spoke without stuttering. "Dad, look." He pointed to the backyard. Through the window, I saw Carl, bruised and bleeding, holding a gallon jug of water. "It's from the supply," he gasped. "Linda's been dosing it with ketamine to keep you all compliant." Maggie's eyes widened. "That's why everyone's so angry. They're drugged." Carl nodded. "She's been selling the excess to cartels. That's how she laundered the money. But there's more." He handed me a flash drive. "The water system's linked to a timer. At midnight, it'll flood the neighborhood with enough ketamine to overdose 100 people." I checked my watch. 10:15 p.m. We split up. Maggie took Ethan to the news van parked 3 blocks away. I followed Carl to the water plant, a concrete bunker behind the community garden. "Why help us?" I asked. He smirked. "Linda stiffed me on my cut, and I hate bullies." The plant's door was unlocked. Inside, the control panel blinked red. A countdown glowed. 01:45:00. Carl typed furiously. "Need a password? Linda's birthday, maybe? October 31st? I tried 1031. The screen flashed. Access denied. "Wait," Carl muttered. "Her son's death. The one she covered up?" The words hit me. Serenity Oaks water supply. The map on the USB showed a burial plot labeled J.R. Senior I, typed JRSR. Access granted. Carl laughed. "You're smarter than you look, Agent." But before I could reply, the door slammed open. Linda stood there, flanked by her enforcers, and Rico, my DEA handler, smirked. "Sorry, friend. The cartel pays better." Linda's laugh echoed off the concrete walls. "You really thought you'd win?" She nodded at Rico. "Take him." But Rico didn't move. Instead, he pulled a flash drive from his pocket, the same one Carl had given me. "You're slipping, Linda. The cartel doesn't pay that well." Everything happened at once. Carl lunged for the control panel. Rico tackled Linda's enforcers. I grabbed a pipe from the wall, swung at Linda, and missed. She slashed at me with a knife, her perfume choking me. "You ruined everything!" she screamed. Then the timer beeped. 00:30:00. Carl yelled, "Abort the system!" I smashed the control panel with the pipe. Sparks flew. The countdown froze at 00:29:59. Linda spat at me. "You think this stops anything? The ketamine's already in the pipes. Your little autistic boy will overdose first." Rage blinded me. I punched her. She crumpled, blood dripping from her nose. "Don't you ever talk about my son." Rico dragged her up. "We need to flush the water." "But," Carl started. Boom! The ground shook. Alarms blared. Maggie's voice crackled over my radio. "They're evacuating the neighborhood. Ethan's seizing. He drank the water." My knees buckled. Number not him, not my boy. The news van screeched to a halt outside the plant. Maggie shoved paramedics aside, Ethan limp in her arms. His eyes rolled back, foam at his lips. "Help him!" she screamed. Carl injected him with a syringe. "Naloxone! It'll buy time!" Ethan gasped, vomiting. Maggie sobbed into his hair. "You're okay, baby. Daddy's here." But I wasn't. I was staring at Linda, her face swollen, her voice a hiss. "You'll never prove it was me." Then Rico showed me his phone. Live footage of Linda meeting a cartel boss, bank transfers, a confession. "Insurance," he grinned. "You're not the only one who hates bullies." By dawn, FBI agents swarmed Serenity Oaks. Linda's detention suite was a torture chamber. Drugs, restraints, files on every resident. The water supply tested positive for ketamine. But Ethan wasn't safe. The naloxone wore off. He stopped breathing. Maggie's scream still haunts me. The hospital waiting room smelled like antiseptic and grief. Maggie paced, muttering, "He's a fighter." "He's a fighter." Rico sat beside me. "We got her. Cartel's done, but what?" He hesitated. "The ketamine. It's not just in the water. Linda's been dosing the food at community events. Months of exposure. Ethan's brain..." Maggie collapsed. "He'll never be the same." I wanted to scream, to kill Linda myself. But then Ethan's doctor walked in. "He's stable, but there's something you need to see." Ethan sat up in bed, eyes clear. He looked at me. "Dad, I remember everything. Everything. The taser, the threats, the water." And then he said 3 words he'd never spoken before. "I love you." Maggie burst into tears. I held them both, shaking, but the victory felt hollow. Because outside, a news alert buzzed. HOA President Linda Carmichael found dead in cell. Suspected suicide. No trial. No justice. Just a silenced phone and a smug DEA report. Case closed. Ethan tugged my sleeve. "Dad, what's suicide?" I didn't answer. I was staring at the TV. Linda's last text to me played on repeat. "You think this ends here? The cartel owns this town. They'll come for your boy." The news alert buzzed again. "Cartel-linked bodies found in Austin River. Suspected retaliation for Carmichael's death." Maggie gripped my hand. "They're sending a message." But Ethan just stared at the TV, his voice steady. "They're scared of you now, Dad." Scared. Number. The cartel didn't scare me. What scared me was Ethan's eyes. Clear, unclouded, like he'd been awake all along. Rico showed up at the hospital that night. "The DEA's cleaning house," he said. "Linda's files exposed half the Austin PD. You're untouchable now." I didn't feel untouchable. I felt hollow. Maggie hugged Ethan. "We'll move," she said. "Start over. Somewhere without HOAs, without rules." Ethan frowned. "But the cartel's everywhere, Mom." He was right. They were. But Rico handed me a file. Witness protection, new names, new life. Maggie stiffened. "We're not running." "It's not running," I said. "It's surviving." We left at dawn. No goodbyes, no closure. Just a DEA van, a new identity, and a folder labeled Operation Clean Slate. But as we drove, Ethan whispered, "Dad, the ketamine, it didn't just hurt me, it woke me up." I glanced back. His eyes were wide, unblinking. "What do you mean?" "I heard things," he said. "Linda's calls, the cartel's plans, everything." He paused. "I can help you stop them." Maggie's breath caught. "Ethan, no." But I knew that look. It was the same resolve I'd seen in the mirror after my first DEA bust. 3 months later, we lived in a cabin in Colorado. No HOA, no rules, just mountains and silence. Then Ethan found the letter. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm dead, but you're not safe. The ketamine in your system wasn't random. It was a test. You're special. You're one of us now. Linda." Maggie burned the letter. "She's gone," she said. But Ethan smiled. "No, Mom, she's everywhere." And for the first time, I believed him.